Exploring Death, Ancestral Transition, and Spiritual Evolution in Sesa Suban series.
So, I ran out of space on my computer. So this is going to be the part 1 of episode 1 of Sesa Suban, Sacred Conversations. And I want to extend my gratitude to Mama Ayana Iyi for continuing to advance this conversation, dealing with ancestral transition and evolution. And I look forward to more conversations with her. So the objectives for this series are to highlight our cultural burial practices, to explore how death functions in our inner and outer worlds, and finally to provide space for otherwise unwelcome expression, which I think is probably my favorite part, providing space for otherwise unwelcome, sometimes inappropriate expression regarding this conversation. So again, very grateful for being able to engage here. Also in my frenzy of setting up the first episode, I did neglect consciously to pull those 2 cards that were supposed to be pulled. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. The book just flew out. I don't need the book. You don't need the book. Maybe I could have shuffled these ahead of time. So again, just here in the glow, it was a really wonderful conversation. We got to cover most of the things that we plan to speak about, including how her childhood experiences influenced the way she interacted with death. We got to talk about the gifts that she gained by surrendering to spirit. And we were in the middle of the different ways in which she was able to grow and become more intimate with death. So I look forward to further conversations, but I think this is a good start. Full moon in Gemini. The answers you need are coming. The answers you need are within. And expect powerful change. New moon eclipse. Boom, we just came out of a new moon. So the final question was, what is one truth about death that more people should understand? And the cards meant to guide that part of the conversation where the answers you need are coming. Yes, they are. This is just beginning. And expect powerful change. So on that note, I don't really know what more there is to say. So I will definitely include information about the projects that Mama Ayana has going on right now. And we look forward to continuing the conversation. Peace and love. Welcome. Welcome. This is Sesa Suban, Conversations in Death, Spiritual Evolution, and Ancestral Transition. I am Mama Tarian, Ancestral Transition Doula and Spiritual Evolution Doula. It's a full spectrum, and I am honored to be joined by Mama Ayana Iyi. We have begun this conversation because death seems like a word that's too small sometimes. So we try to come up with other ways and other ways of looking at it and thinking about it. But the word death itself and the idea of death definitely does pack a punch, and it requires our attention. And so let's talk about it.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Mama Terry. And this is a very interesting subject and definitely a very pertinent one. So I'm all in.
Absolutely. So my intention was to pull two cards to help to guide the conversation, but I think we can add that on and just kind of get into it. So I just had three particular questions that we were using to guide the conversation. But I just want to briefly introduce you, Mama Ayana, my Mama Ayana, Mother Umi, widow of Ahati Kalindi E, crone, witch, seer, dark entheogenic goddess. I should go on, but can you give us a little bit about your history in your own words?
My history, okay, well, born and raised in Detroit, um, educated here. I am a what you would call a wanderlust, so I've traveled to many places in my lifetime, out of the country, Africa, Europe, throughout, and just gained a lot of clarification on the ability to read different people in different cultures, so that opened up my eyes to a whole lot. So just being authentic has been my goal in life, being authentic and understanding that silence, profundity, truth, and intelligence are the rules that I live by. So, and I'd like to pass that energy on.
Sure. And you have some projects that you have that you've begun. I'd like to get to that also. So I want to just say that out loud to myself so that we don't forget, because I would love to catch up on what you're doing. But let's just go into how did your childhood experiences influence the way that you interacted with death?
That's a very interesting question, and I have thought about that. As a child, I didn't really experience any death as far as that would be, would cause me a great amount of grief. The only experiences that I've had in my childhood would be the loss of my pets, through either violence or they just dying. And that in and of itself, of course, was very traumatic for a young person, but children, from what I can see where I'm sitting now, process death a whole lot differently. They're more adaptable than we are because I don't know if their little souls are ready to take on that type of grief. So as a child, death was not just really a part of my life. But as I got a little older, I'm going to say around 14 and 15, I began to realize that I had some sort of connection with the energy of death because I could pretty much feel, I can't tell you that I could tell, but I could feel if the presence of, and I didn't understand it was death at the time, but there was definitely a presence that let me know that a loved one, someone close by, would be leaving here. And it's a feeling that I really had to come to terms with as I got older. And I think Spirit was very kind to me by allowing me to take my time because it would be scary when my predictions would come true. And what Spirit didn't want me to do was be fearful of this, what I used to call a curse, but now it's a gift that I wouldn't be frightened. So as I matured, it just, added to it. It got a little stronger. I was able to understand it. Books would fall out off the shelf in front of my feet at bookstores, and I would open the page and there would be a message for me there in regards to what I was seeking. So I know that I was being guided in some way by something more powerful than I was able to understand at that point in my life. So childhood experiences, nah, not really, but yeah, as I got older, I could see a whole lot more. Um, and I understand that, what one of your questions, and if I could just move from that one, if you don't mind, what gifts have I gained by surrendering to spirit? Well, and that's the word, to surrender, to understand that death is definitely a part of life. It's not so much that you're going to die because we're all going to leave here. I say that to myself on an occasion or two. I'm like, damn, one day, I'm just not going to be here like this no more. And it just kind of sits with you there, but it's not something that you dwell on, of course. But it's not so much that we have to die because we got to go, but it's how you have to go. And that is what causes the fear and the distress and anxiety behind death. for me, for what I understand, because I mean, someone to be taken from you suddenly, through an accident or through a short illness or just gone, that is a very hard thing for a soul to try to come to terms with. So not so much that we die, that's a given.
Mhm.
And when we process it that way, I think that comes from dealing with grief in such a way that you can process this, that, you could process it. I'm getting older. I've certainly lived more years than what I'm going to live, so looking down that light, down that tunnel, or whatever you want to call that, knowing that eventually this will come, because no one knows the day or the hour or the minute that we're going to leave here, but we're going to leave here. So I would say that that is a gift of acceptance. That would be the gift of acceptance.
Acceptance. So there's mystery involved. There may also be an assumption of suffering that we think automatically comes with death. That's not
And
necessarily the case.
well, when dealing with the grief that I've gone through, and in terms of me leaving here, I think what touches my heart more about that than anything else is the fact that I love my children so much that I don't want them to feel that pain, you know? And so I talk candidly now, much to their dismay, about my own passing. I don't just go in on it, but I'm prepared and I'm preparing them, and I'm telling them, look, kids, if it's up to me, and I do believe that at some point it will be up to me, unless I walk out the door and a piano fall on my ass. But um, I have no plans on getting sick and dying. I'm just going to die when the time comes. And I say that because I've taken control of my health. I make the decisions for my health. I do the things that I'm supposed to do in order to stay healthy, a clear mind, exercise, the right foods, the right people around me, the energy, So looking
So
for and
you
looking,
have peace in knowing, there's a peace in knowing that you are doing everything that you know to do so that
yes, there's,
everything is right. Okay. Yeah, that's really
yeah,
important.
there is a peace in knowing that. Yeah. And I know that we hold on to life because that's our egos. That's all we know. That's all we know is life. So, hey, the great unknown, the fifth dimension, whatever you want to call it, I'll call it the fifth dimension, because on my mushroom journeys, I've gone to that place a number of times and have ran into souls, people that are dying or going to die, and it reveals itself to me. I feel like the psilocybin mushrooms have chosen me for that work specifically. So, because every time I would go into a journey, it would take me to that place where I would be assisting someone who needed to help cross over, or I would be able to tell that somebody was going to pass, And when I say tell, that's the wrong word. I could feel the energy, and there's no way I could describe what that feels like, but it's a knowing that someone is going to leave. Now, does it tell me who it's going to be? Sometimes I'll get an energy. My mother had five sisters. It was six girls, five, and my mother lived longer than any one of them. But each time, as one of her sisters was preparing to leave here, I would say to my mom, unknowingly, Mom, I think we need to go see Auntie Clara, because I don't think you're going to be seeing her again, or Auntie Myra, Auntie Bertha. And so when I would do that, and I would take my mother and then they would die shortly after that, my mother started looking at me a little bit weird. I'm not going to lie. She started looking at me a little bit weird, like, right, like saying, nobody is supposed to know about this but God. So who are you? She would question that, and I'm questioning it too, because and then I would be like, why are y'all giving me this feeling if I can't do anything about it? Why do
What
I
age,
need to know? Hmm?
around what age did that start? When you were actually
Hmm.
letting, you had a better idea of what was going on and you were actually letting your mother know?
I'm going to say about my early 50s. Mm-hmm. Yeah, about my early 50s, right in there. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Because you were cooking. Um, so I was getting ready to ask you, Okay, so when you were a child, you had this feeling that you didn't necessarily associate with death because the sense wasn't developed like that. And then when you
Correct.
are 50, um, you begin to make that, at that point, you've made that association. So, what was the difference in that sense that you have between when you were a child and when you were a, a mature grown up?
I would think experience. I mean, just to know that when that feeling came, I understood it. There was like a quickening within me to understand that this is what this is, and it's coming from somewhere, and there's absolutely nothing you could do about it. Um, and I won't mention the young sister's name, but she's part of the community. And I dreamt of her before she got pregnant, or right around when she was getting pregnant. And there was this feeling, and me and this sister, we're not that close, but we know each other in the community, very pleasant meetings when we would meet with one another. So anyway, this feeling persisted with me. I'm living in a whole nother state at this time. This feeling persisted. And so after 4 months, I finally called her. And I said, baby, I had a dream about you and you were pregnant. She's like, oh my God, Mama, I am pregnant. I said, oh my goodness. Okay, well, congratulations. I said, but is everything okay? Are you feeling okay? Are you doing what you're supposed to do? So on and so forth. She said, oh yeah, everything is fine. I said, well, okay, I just want to let you know that, I dreamt about you and you were giving birth in this building and so on and so forth. So anyway, it comes time for her, but I had the feeling it was there, and this is the one that just really kicked it in for me. It was there. So she gives birth and the baby is born, stillborn. And she calls me, and I'm getting the chills right now thinking about this. She calls me and she says, well, Mom, I did lose the baby. And how did you know? There was no way that I could answer her how I would know. And then I'm speaking to spirit. I'm like, why would you give me this information? And I couldn't change this information for her. Why do I need to know these things or feel these things? I've never gotten that answer yet. Even through my mushroom journeys, I just know that I've been chosen to do this type of work. But to what does it benefit me? And I'm not being selfish with saying that, but those feelings. And so after that one in particular, maybe a couple of more other three or fours, that was the one that just really clued it in about that feeling of don't question it because there's nothing you can do about it. When it comes, and you just got to settle into yourself. So when it does come, here's what I do. I call people that are close to me so that I could hear their voice and feel their energy. Daughter, are you okay? Son, are you okay? Girlfriend, are you okay? Son, everybody okay? Okay. So that happens for me. And yeah, I can kind of rule out those that are very close to me. Um, but in terms of my mother's sisters, it was there, and it was just a mom, we need to go see one of your sisters, and then they would check on out of here. So I guess you could say I've had a very intimate relationship with death. We have talked on an occasion or two, and I mean, I have so many stories, Terry, and I don't know how much time you have on this one, but in terms of me and death, so it's interesting that you would choose me to speak about death in particular. Okay, so
It can be surprising.
yeah,
Even, I mean, yeah. I mean, due to my own experiences, you have walked with me for a good chunk of my journey, just in understanding, exploring death, for sure, and experiencing that whole the spectrum and the the duality of birth and death, the entrances and the exits, and how they just seem to be, rotating or spiraling, but on the same spectrum. I think the first time I reached out to you for a reading, it was, um, like, are me and my husband gonna stay together? That kind of thing. And like, oh, I hope that, that. And then it just got into like deeper and deeper, like, is my child gonna come back? You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it sent me down this rabbit hole, just sort of chasing after death and life. So yeah, it's
Oh,
been really interesting. I remember you stopped. You were in the middle of burying your sister,
mm-hmm.
and you reached out to me to let me know that I could expect to see my child again. And I couldn't believe I was even getting any communication from you during that time. But you took the time out in the middle of your grief to check on us. And that's always been what you do. You've always been right there. Like if I ever had a question or curiosity, even on even the most mundane things, you know always have come back with thoughtful thoughtful responses or even questions themselves. So the third question was, in what way have you grown to feel more intimate with death? And you did already touch on that. One thing that I did not ask ahead. Do you remember this? That's just a silly question. Um,
Never.
you had an encounter with um, some strangers on riding motorcycles
Yes. Oh my
um,
goodness. I
this
told you
was
about that? Okay.
a few years, and I wondered
Yeah.
if you remember that you even shared it
I don't
with
remember
me.
sharing that with you personally, but I do remember putting that. It was so profound because again, there is the intimacy of death. Death and I can relate, but but again, there's that big old why. But okay, so the lady and her guy are on 8 Mile and they're on their motorcycles and they're making noise the way motorcycles do. And I look over at the lady and I'm struck by looking at this lady and I'm like, well, okay, well, she's on a big fine bike. She got on her leather hookup. She looking good, her hair blowing, and they ride. And I was like, yeah, okay, but I was still just kind of, I just watched her until she disappeared up into the next light. So I get in my car and I meet them at that light and I'm looking at her again and I'm just really like struck by this woman and I don't even know why. And then so they take off before I do when the light changes. And within seconds, I hear this loud boom. And as I'm rolling, I'm seeing this lady flying through the sky. I didn't see her hit the ground, but I see her flying through the sky. And I pull over because, oh my God, she's just been hit by a truck. And it was as if death kind of waved at me because it was sitting on the back of her motorcycle with her and we communicated or something. But with me pulling over, I felt like I was supposed to sit there and wait on her spirit to join me so that I could help her cross over, is what because I sat there for the longest moment there. You know, I was shaking, of course, and and seeing that the bike was totally broken half, and I'm hearing her partner screaming and hollering. But I'm like, I'm waiting on you, sweetie. I'm waiting on you. Um, 3 days later, I took a 9 gram mushroom trip, thinking that I would see her some kind of way to assist her even more in passing over, but she wasn't there. She didn't come through on that journey. So that was the end of that. But just the fact that I was so intently looking at her the way that I was, there was something other than just her leather and her motorcycle. And I knew that that was death. And I want to speak on that as well as in terms of Baba Kalindi's passing. In retrospect, it took 21 days for him to make his journey out of here. And with those 21 days, when you have this with death, you understand that I would pull up and death would be sitting I would feel the energy. First week, 2 weeks, pull up, death would be sitting in the living room in the chair. Death was in the house now. And there was no way to move death on. It's kind of like the boat that comes across the mythical river Styx. and drops anchor to take that soul to the underworld. And so this boat had traveled across the river Styx, because if it don't anchor, if the boat don't anchor, it's sitting there saying you got a chance to live, do something different, make it happen, this, that, and the third. But I knew that this boat had anchored. It was waiting on Baba to make the decision to, you know, leave up out of here, and because we coming real close to his time of death, April the 10th. So if I get a little shaky, don't mind me there. But having passed on, when people pass that are close to me, I audibly hear their words to me. When my mother passed, she said to me, "Stay close to your sister. She's going to be joining me soon." And 10 months later, my sister she died. When that sister died, she said, "Don't leave Kalindi." And she also said, "Don't worry, Bev, you're going to live a really long time." So nobody knew that I was thinking about breaking up with Baba Kalindi. And nobody, because I hadn't said those words out loud, nobody knew that I was thinking that, well, my mama done died, my brother done died, my sister done died, I must be next. So I'm thinking, I'm next, right? But I hadn't said that to anybody, but that was my sister's message that came through. And when Baba died, he passed through me and he said, "Don't be angry," just as clear and loud, so clairaudience, you picking up the energies, you can actually hear them audibly speak to you. So I have this energy. Obviously, I don't know if it's the Scorpio thing because I am that. I don't know if because I'm sisters with Oya, I thought she was my mother, but no, she is my sister from what I understand through a reading. Um, and that I do work at the gates of the cemetery, which represents the Oya energy. So I'm sure, and all of my everythings is in spirit.
Can you expound on that? You said you work at the gates of the cemetery.
Well, that is where Oya just kind of, when you pay homage to her, I put gifts at the gate of the cemeteries for her, the 9 pennies. I'll put the information that requires an Oya energy, the purple, the eggplant, things like that. I'll do that to acknowledge her presence in my life and how she has caused change, call on her and make the changes happen quickly, but also in understanding death, because death is quick. No matter how you look at it, no matter how long you linger, when it comes, it's you done. It's a wrap. We dying, as opposed to I'm dead. It's a whole nother thing. I can tell you I've closed the eyes of 4 individuals upon their death. I've taken and done that work there. And I can also feel when the spirit leaves out of them what they're feeling, because my brother died and we're all standing around the bed. And when his soul lifts up and the machine goes straight, I started laughing. And of course, they looking at me like, there she go being weird again. But I felt his happiness. I felt him being free.
Yeah.
And I know that when they were working on Baba Kalindi here, because I called the ambulance, they were working on Baba Kalindi, and now I'm on his chest and I'm giving him CPR and I'm blowing in his mouth and come on, you got to come on back to me. It ain't time yet. And in retrospect, I wish I just would have laid his sword in his chest and let him leave out of here peacefully. But in the moments of his death, he was thinking about me. He was like, "Say, don't be angry, baby. Don't be angry." I still don't know what that means. Angry at who? At him? At the situation? I don't know, but I can hear and I can see. I've seen ghosts. I've seen spirits. I can feel. This is just who I am. So again, for you picking me for this particular subject, why did you do that in the first place? How did you know? Um, so yeah, so yeah, me and death, and I just believe that when my time comes, that death will be kind to me, because I have my own plans. I'm going to have a beautiful bed laid out, and I'm going to have my candles and soft music and a water fountain. And, I won't be too explicit. I'll have other things laying there at my side in order to give me pleasure as I check up out of here. Um, I'm just saying, you got to look at it as an experience of we're moving on to a whole nother energy. And because I know that there is life, if that's what you want to call consciousness,
Yeah.
yeah, life after this physical life here, because Baba lets me know on several occasions that when he's here, he's here. He's here, and he oftentimes comes during the day, because I think he says if I do this at night, she's gonna get scared. So again, so processing death and preparing my children, and so they can prepare their children for something that's ultimately going to happen. And if we embrace it in such a way, I believe death will be, if you're no longer fearful of it, you've reached a huge moment in your life to not to have to carry the fear of death with you, because yeah, it's not the fact that we got to
It's
go,
about
because we
our,
got to go. It's how we go. Yeah.
yeah, it's our perspective and it's our focus. I think maybe somewhere at the beginning of my journey,
Yes,
I'm
baby, you've
tired of
had a
using the word
journey.
journey. When I was 9 years old, I remember thinking to myself, I want to understand death the way that the Africans did.
Mm,
And I think what I meant was like them having the understanding of the continuum, not being mournful, I think was a big part of it. Not having suffering be attached to it. And I just remember having that thought. I remember where I was in a classroom, and then I just went back to what I was doing. And I didn't remember that moment until I was sitting in my birthing room having my final checkup with my midwife
mhm,
after the transition of my last daughter. And
mm,
I don't know what she asked me.
mhm,
I do not remember the question she asked me, but right then it was like, I said that I wanted to be able to understand death the way the Africans did. And I know what I meant by that. And that's what was happening through all of my accumulated experiences up to that point, and certainly beyond. That was it, and that
mm,
continues to be it. So this is my very long training.
mm,
That's part of it. And
mm.
as I said, you have been a part, walking with me for a big part of that process. I
Oh,
do
baby, I hold
lose
you close to
count.
my heart. I do close to my heart. You are Tyrion. Hmm. Yeah.
And so, and I feel it. You said when one, how do you say it? When one of us loses one from our womb, we all feel it because we all share one womb. Can
Yes.
you
Yes.
rephrase that the way?
Well, as mothers, and that womb connection again, I give a lot over to my experiences with psilocybin mushrooms, which is why I would have the retreats in the woods with the women, and we would take the sacrament there, and we would connect with each other's wombs. Member of the community lost her child. We all, every morning, we suffered with her. We felt pain of loss, and even with miscarriage, and with some women, whether they, and I'm going to say all women, but abortions, these souls choose us. These souls choose us for a
Yeah.
reason, and they stay within ourselves forever and ever. And what these souls really require upon leaving these misconceptions is that they want to be acknowledged, that I was a part of you, that I am a part of you. And so what I've um, offered to some people is a ritual to do in order to make that energy feel burdensome inside of the womb. In other words, to free the womb up from the grief that can be stored there. Now, my son is doing powerful work in relieving the grief was sitting in women's wombs, which is oftentimes, more than just the loss of a child, but just that's where we store our grief at. But the grief of losing a child They want to be acknowledged. So I tell them to name the baby. You know, intrinsically, you know whether that child was a boy or girl. You know, just by the name that you choose. And the personality will come from that name that you choose. And you offer that child a reason why they didn't come through if it's an abortion, you know, and if it's a miscarriage, you just come to terms with that energy as well,